Yeah,
I'm gonna go ahead and start the meeting to be respectful of everybody's
sure.
time, Chris's time. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is our April masterclass, and we're really glad that you guys can come. We've been so busy since the conference. We've had such good feedback from everyone that attended, everyone that missed it and can't wait for our 2026 conference. And of course, the number one thing that we heard was that people want to network. They want to stay connected. Our members want to learn. They want to do master classes. So we have Chris here from the Pocono Mountains Visitors Bureau, and he's going to talk about the state of the vacation rental industry. So I'm going to pass it to you, Chris.
Thank you. And first, everybody, thanks for having me. I really appreciate that. Anytime we get to talk about tourism, we like that. And I did prepare some slides, and the information I'll be imparting right now is this was also presented to our board of directors. So for the Pocono Mountains Visitors Bureau, so you're seeing the same things that they did, and the timing is fairly close. You're seeing exactly the same information. But if I use some terms that I'll try not to. If I catch myself using a term, I'll try to define it so that it doesn't seem that uh, that that I'm the only one understanding here. Maybe one or two other people on the call. So I want to be as clear as possible, and then leave some time for anyone to answer any questions, or that I hope I can answer any questions that you have. So first, I hope everybody can see the slide. One of the things that there's a lot of data out there. There's really good first party, third party data. We know how important data is. We spend a lot of time analyzing it from a number of different sources. We're spending a lot of money actually working with Amazon Web Services to aggregate all of the data from our market so we can make better marketing decisions. But there's one real tail of the tape that we call it that is pretty much this is how well your destination is doing. So the numbers that you're seeing in front of you are the hotel tax. So as you know, every room that is sold here within the market, whether it be a short-term rental or what we call a brick and mortar property, a larger brick and mortar property resort, for instance, is charged a 3% hotel tax. And the way that breaks down is the Pocono Mountains Visitors Bureau is a recipient of about 90% of that tax, between 85 and 90%. The balance of it goes to each individual county, 4% for collecting it, and there's some other percentages in there that they get for various things. So we get about between 85% and 90% of the hotel taxes generated in our four counties. Now we take those dollars and we market outside of this market. We also market in this area as well, but we also market outside of it. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But the numbers that you're seeing right in front of you are the actual hotel tax numbers for 2024. And this was definitely a slide that I'm sorry, I got to move some things down here. This is definitely a slide that our board saw, and you could see that. And let me say this first: the Pocono Mountains is defined as four counties: Carbon, Monroe, Wayne, and Pike. It's 2,400 square miles, believe it or not, all said and done. And we host anywhere from 28 to 30 million guests a year total. So the numbers you see are a tax that has been generated in 24, and we compared it to 23. So the numbers are fairly close. The biggest difference is in Pike County. Some of it is a result of a little bit less in short-term rental, but also too, we had a property that had a major ransomware incident that is a major property in that market, and they were not able to operate for about a month to 2 months. So that probably translated into about 10% loss, a 10% loss of the tax for that year. But you can see how the other counties are stacking up. Monroe is the lion's share of it, which I have another slide on that to show you. But I wanted to point out Wayne and Pike counties for two reasons. Number one, they were up 8 and 5%. Carbon has seen an incredible increase over the last 2 to 3 years due primarily to short-term rentals. If you're familiar with Carbon County, Jim Thorpe is the main attraction. The county really doesn't have any properties. They're one or two. They're limited service properties. And there's also some smaller properties. And with Jim Thorpe and Blue Mountain and some others, there's major attractions within that market. So short-term rentals is the key lodging asset in Carbon County. We've seen fairly strong growth in that county within the last 2 to 3 years. Wayne actually this year did fairly well, and Pike usually does fairly well based upon short-term rentals. Now, you see the huge difference in Monroe versus the other counties. Monroe has a lot of short-term rentals. I think the active numbers between 4,500 and 5,000. But we also have three of the largest resorts, being Camelback, Great Wolf, and Kalahari. Kalahari having close to 1,000 rooms, so that's why that number's huge. Now, the next slide looks at the amount of tax, and I should say the previous slide was the amount of tax paid to the Pocono Mountains Visitors Bureau. The slide you're looking at in front of you shows that progression from 2017 to the present. So effectively, the hotel tax has doubled since 2017. Now, a large portion of that is due to Kalahari. Kalahari in 2007 opened for the first time, and in 2017-18, that area opened an additional 500 rooms. So that was one of the reasons. The other one, quite honestly, was the pandemic in 2020. You look at that number and you think to yourself, well, it didn't do anything for you. No, but when you look at 21, 22, and 23, business took an incredible leap in those years, and we would argue that the pandemic, and we were just talking about this right before we opened the meeting, that adversity usually does well for a market like ours because we're very, very close to New York and Philadelphia. So we saw business increase dramatically, and we've kept that with slight variations since 2020, which we feel is a big win for the destination. Now, this is in a percentage layout. This is how it stacks out. Monroe County averages between 70 to 75% of all hotel tax revenue uh, in the destination. The others fall right behind that, Pike and Carbon and Wayne, as you can see on the on the chart to the left. Now to your right, you see the location of the counties, with Monroe being in the middle of the Poconos, and Wayne, of course, being the furthest north, and then Carbon being the furthest south. So that gives you an idea. So we're asked a lot, what do trends look like nationally and locally? Um, we could say that our destination doesn't differ from some others in a lot of respects. The one thing on this chart in the middle, overseas arrivals, really doesn't mean very much to us. We're not a Philadelphia or New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles. We're not a world's destination or an international city like Philadelphia is. However, we do get some hub and spoke from those destinations, but for us, overseas arrivals isn't a big factor. Air passengers aren't a big factor, but we like to have it because we have two airports that are very close to us. Now, overall travel spending is something that we keep an eye on. Hotel demand, short-term rental demand versus regular properties. So to the left, this was December of 2024. This was year-over-year spending. You can see how the numbers in the left-hand side of the chart. We had some fairly aggressive spending versus year over year, and also versus 2019, which, as we all know, tends to be the comparative year for everything. So we saw good spending. We saw hotel demand continue to grow. Star was down a little bit, but I'm sorry, hotel demand was down a little bit year over year, especially related to 2019. But we had some fairly strong growth in all of their categories, and I'll send you this so you guys can take a look at it. Now we use um, two metrics when we look at short-term rentals. This what you're looking at here was prepared by Tourism Economics, which is an Oxford economics company. The state of Pennsylvania also uses Oxford economics and tourism economics for a lot of their reports. So this information is fairly accurate. They pull state tax data, so it's pretty good information. Um, and from that data, we're seeing that they we saw continued growth 20 24 20 24 versus 25, excuse me, 25 24 versus 23. However, that is good. That's projected to slow. Um, Travel indicators are shown on the chart that you're seeing right there. Hotel demand, top 25 group hotel demand and star, which for this market or for the United States, excuse me, short-term rental demand for Air DNA. And I should go back and say we also use key data um, and Air DNA. We found key data related to short-term rental data to be more accurate. So moving forward, this report will show key data versus Air DNA. Now, some of the things you're looking at in the left-hand column, air passengers, as I said, we look at overseas arrivals, we look at, they're not as big a factor for us. Now, national park visits are one thing we do look at because, um, believe it or not, Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area is one of the most top 10 visited parks, national parks in the United States. So over the pandemic, our state and federal parks were just overrun. And now that has slowed dramatically over the last couple of years, especially over the last 2 years. But that's expected to pick up again with some of the tariff talk, some of the government shutdown talk, laying off of some National Park Service employees. That may spur some interest again or spark some interest in visiting national parks. But our park actually does fairly well. So we see that as a very important indicator. Um, this is a chart, 20 March 2020, that infamous month and date that everything shut down. And you can see the decline, the immediate decline in activity in air passengers and hotel demand. So now you can see that that's beginning to look or even exceed 2019 levels, especially air passengers. Air is doing very, very well right now, but with the increase in costs and inflation, we may see that moderate over the next year. There has been a new inflation report that just came out that shows because of the decrease in fuel costs that some core inflation numbers for last month were fairly good. This was as of December, and it was starting to show that inflation. Oops, sorry, let me push this down a little bit. Showed some improvement, but it continues to as we move forward. That's obviously very helpful for obvious reasons, and I'll get to the Poconos in a bit. Unemployment rate is still fairly good. So we have good underlying economics there with unemployment data. So hopefully that means that folks spend. This is a really important slide. This is a trend that we're trying to take advantage of. Um, what you're seeing is an outlay of Star CoStar data related to um, year over year demand for different types of lodging. So luxury through economy. And we've seen this over the last 2 years. Mid-scale and economy is declining dramatically because HHI of 75,000 and under it is really, really decreasing. We saw a lot of money in the economy right into 2020 and 2021. We had a lot of folks who had a lot of disposable income who would never would have had it before, and they were spending the economy in mid-scale properties. But the luxury and upper scale through luxury did very, very well, and they continue to. So when you look at ADR and demand, RevPAR and occupancy, they're doing well. So we actually put together a number of TV spots and messaging from a marketing standpoint that attempts to take advantage of that. Not only with short-term rentals, but with our four diamond properties. We just had the Swiftwater that has opened, has done very, very well. Uh, Skytop is doing very well. French Manor, Woodlock. We are in an area that we have a lot of four diamond properties, and we're finding that folks are attracted to upscale through luxury want that. And as you know, we're very close to New York and Philadelphia. where you have HHIs of 100 plus, that's fairly common. And so the disposable income is there to support that. And we've been trying to take advantage of that trend. Consumer sentiment is declining. We actually, I will say this, after the election last year, we saw an immediate pickup in consumer confidence. And over the last few weeks, it's waned a little, but the first quarter seems to be fairly strong. Um, and I think this is no surprise to anybody. We're going to see a lot of slowdown in Canadian inbound travel. Again, we don't rely on overseas travel as much as some other destinations do, but we have a lot of folks who are snowbirds that come through from Canada through the Poconos down into Florida. So some of our properties are concerned that that might be an issue. But again, we're not like Erie, Pennsylvania, where we're marketing in Canada. And actually, we've never marketed in Canada because I've always thought that since we're so close to New York and Philadelphia, and there's so much population there, why would we want to market in Canada? So even at the time of this report, Tourism Economics and Oxford Economics predicted that growth would moderate in 2025 from 2.8, 2.9 to 2%. I think that's pretty clear. And we see some other data after that related to travel that shows the same thing. It's not a complete shutdown of growth, but it's definitely a more moderate growth picture at 2%. Okay, so what about us? Occupancy is regaining a solid footing. Year over year, we're up 2.9%, which is a good thing. Um, However, our ADR continues to run behind previous years. So not only did we see growth in occupancy after 2020, but we saw very solid ADR, and that continues to decline. Where now it's getting to be more normal, we believe. We still don't have a lot of inventory like some other destinations do, so theirs is declining a little bit quicker than ours. But we were able to retain some semblance of rate, but it is absolutely declining. RevPAR, again, as a function of that, also shows that softness. Now, what you're looking at here is the Pocono Mountains is one of a number of regions in the state that the state designates, the Department of Community Economic Development designates as regions. Now, our regions just happens to overlay completely the Pocono Mountains, so we don't have any other counties in our market. So you're looking at metrics right across the board: occupancy, ADR, um, and RevPAR. And you could see we outpace the rest of the state, which includes Pittsburgh in the countryside. It also includes Philadelphia in their countryside. Well, Philadelphia countryside is a little bit higher in occupancy, but you can see their rates are lower. So revenue wise, we're doing much better than the rest of the state in ADR and RevPAR. But occupancy is kind of like all over the board. Now, looking at Lehigh Valley, that's a 62% occupancy, but at a 115 rate versus 204. And again, these are all averages as we know. Um, and Philadelphia being at 159. Now it's interesting, Dutch Country Roads combines Gettysburg, Lancaster, and Hershey. So that's a pretty heavy number. It's interesting if you would look at them separately, the numbers would probably be much different. But that's how the state looks at it, and that's how we compare it year over year. Um, so I'm going to get to, well, this is a slide I really want to get to, excuse me. So this is aggregate lodging performance, star and regular lodging revenue. So you can see the aggregate revenue to the chart at the right is in dark blue, and short-term rental revenue share is in light blue. Um, and you can see how that looks. We had two or three. Let me move. I got to move this. Thank you. We had 2 or 3 months in the picture that you're seeing on that chart where we exceeded 50% of revenue coming from short-term rentals, and that's in what we term the high season, right? So July and August, and also too that was in July, the month we had the race. I mean, there was a number of different events too that really helped to push that occupancy. So that's fairly strong. We do have some room for growth in some other months of the year, but having 50% of that coming in two of the highest months of the year is pretty significant. And our argument would be that this lodging is absolutely needed within this market. It's very clear we do not have enough rooms in the market from brick and mortar properties to handle the demand. I mean, that's pretty clear just by looking at this chart. But Star made up 45.3% of lodging revenue in 2024. Okay, so this was one of the last slides I wanted to show, which is a big one. So 75% of visitation and revenues come from New York and Philadelphia, 50% from New York, 24% from Philadelphia, and the others just fall in line. So out of our budget, which is about 14.5 million that you saw there, we spend between 8 and 9 million on hard media, which means television, digital, social, our Pocono television network, which is available to about 20 million homes in streaming and over the air signal and cable networks, whatever. So we try to spend as much money as we can marketing in those markets outside of what you see right here. So a lot of times people will say, "Well, I'm seeing some spots here, and why are you flighting this spot here?" And what we run in this market in media is much, much different than what we run in New York and Philadelphia. So those were the slides I had to just introduce, um, where we are and what we're doing. And, I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
Hey, Chris, it's
Yes, sir.
Marty.
Hey,
Hi,
how you doing?
good. Good to see you
Good.
here.
Good to see you too.
So, question. We're looking at average daily rate and RevPAR, basically those kind of numbers. And I'm wondering if those numbers are down a bit because the supply of short-term properties has increased. And so it's just a more competitive market between those properties.
Well, I could tell you that the answer to that is yes, and it's the same for brick and mortar properties. So when Gray Wolf, for instance, in Monroe County, opened up a new tower and introduced villas, that absolutely affected rate almost immediately because you had so many more rooms coming on the market. And the Swiftwater coming online in Monroe County um, that absolutely happened. So
But
the
so
more
competition reduces prices, basically.
correct, the more supply you get, but I would say comparatively to all the other regions in the state, we're still holding rate fairly well. Now we lost it fairly rapidly in 2 to 3 years. So, the rate integrity that we had 2 or 3 years ago is not the same as what it was. There's no question about that. And that's a function of, you know, there's a lot more competition. All the destinations are open now. People could fly and do all the things they couldn't do before. So, there's a lot of reasons for that.
So do you think there's still room for more STR properties and more brick and mortar to support the demand?
Well, I mean, there are some
Or is it particular
plans.
like Jim Thorpe would be a great place for more, and maybe Monroe County's not?
Well, yeah. So if you're close to carbon, I would say that would be correct until we get more attraction, um, until we get some more attractions. But I would say this too in Monroe, there are attractions like, for instance, in the summer, um, great or not great, excuse me, Camelback has an outdoor water park, and maybe there are opportunities to partner with them more. I don't know, but to me that would be. I think there's probably needs to be more synergy and cross pollination, even with the ski resorts too. I mean, there absolutely isn't enough. Say on the weekend of President's Day weekend, that's a huge weekend for ski resorts. Now this year the weather was not good, which wasn't good for the destination, but the first 2 months they did pretty well.
Yeah,
And in December they did too. So now the previous 2 years before that were terrible. I mean, so it's very, very weather dependent. But there are some other developers looking to develop more attractions here. and they all would be in Monroe County.
Okay. Thank you.
So how do you guys want to handle questions? I don't know how you guys do that.
Hey, I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm driving in. This is Jason. I'm not as much of a frequent member on this as I'd like to be, but I'm glad to be able to make this. And thank you for sharing some of that data.
Sure.
Uh, just a question. I'm not sure if you can answer this, but what are some of those upcoming new attractions?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be coy, but I can't answer that. Two of them are very significant. To a large degree would be game changers. So, but there's a lot of uncertainty out there right now with what's happening in the markets, but one of them looks pretty good. So I'm keeping my fingers and toes crossed on that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I figured you would.
Can you? Hi, Chris. This is Chase.
Hey, how are you?
Nice to meet you. Thank you for the presentation. Uh,
Sure.
you said you couldn't speak about the upcoming attractions and new attractions. Can you speak to where they might be located, like which counties?
Monroe.
Okay. And also, with one of the graphs you showed visitation from New York versus Philadelphia. Has that trend been consistent where New York is twice the size of Philadelphia in terms of visitation? And is there what drives that? Why so many more from New York versus Philly?
Well, um, I could. There's a couple of answers that I'll try to truncate it if I can. We've seen Philadelphia grow a few points over the last 3 to 4 years. We've been very purposeful in investing um, in television in those markets and social and digital. So we've been very purposeful with that. New York, I would say that there's been a very, very long track record of significant attractions advertising in that market, going all the way back to the 60s and the 70s with Mount Airy Lodge, all the Cove resorts, Penn Hills. So there was some knowledge of New York, of the Poconos, I'm sorry, in New York, in the five boroughs in Long Island. So we just kind of updated that and continued to spend. So each year we're spending millions in both of those markets um, for a number of different reasons based on the data I've showed you. And one of the things that we are doing too is we just contracted with Amazon Web Services to build us a data lake that we're putting into this data lake any data that we can get from any one of our 600 members, um, putting it into a clean room, then putting in an AWS AI piece on top of it. And then injecting all of our data, our website data, our digital data, everything that we use. So then we could actually be very purposeful in how we're advertising. So we just had a marketing meeting and did a presentation on key data, which basically shows trending year over year of how people, what their booking patterns are. So we can deploy like digital very specifically um, based upon what booking patterns are versus like the shotgun approach and just spending everywhere and hoping people, book. We're using a rifle approach and we're using data and analytics to be able to deploy more effectively our digital, social, and television campaigns. The other thing too is I think we all know this. A lot of people are migrating out of linear and appointment television into streaming. So we're continuing to move more dollars into streaming, like with Peacock, like Hulu, because that we know that's where people are. Um, and we're doing a lot more with that to try to be as effective and efficient as possible with the spends of those dollars. Um, we're trying to use the rifle approach as best we can. And the best way to do that is to do it with data and analytics. And that's why we've been partnering with Amazon Web Services over the last 2 years to come up with some really good programs utilizing all the analytics of our platforms to make better decisions.
Are you targeting more marketing dollars toward Philadelphia? Do you see there's opportunity to grow that?
Yes, that definitely over the last 2 years we've spent more in Philly. And when you look at the Philadelphia DMA, you're not only looking at Philadelphia County, right, but Montgomery County, Bucks, like all the counties around there, northern New Jersey, parts of northern New Jersey and central New Jersey. So it's and Delaware too. So there's a lot more to Philadelphia than just Philadelphia County and the DMA. And we spend based upon DMAs because that's how television is metered and sold. So the New York DMA and the Philadelphia DMA are pretty precise in counties. So, and there's a lot of counties in both of those markets that they're fairly wealthy.
Hmm.
Now, the northern tier of Virginia next to DC is very wealthy too. So we spend in that market. We also spend in the corridor between Pennsylvania and DC because it's a bedroom community for DC. Um, but that's going to get much more competitive with Kalahari putting a second property in there. Great Wolf put another property in Eastern Maryland and Perryville. So that's probably going to affect us a little bit because really, like, Perryville competes. I mean, Perryville pulls folks from Philadelphia that would probably go to the Great Wolf here. Um, so that's been kind of interesting. But they just redirected their campaigns into New York, which kind of helped us. So we also coordinate a lot of our marketing with not so much Camelback, but definitely Kalahari and Great Wolf when we can. We do a lot with them. So, and that drives people into the market. Like Kalahari was spending $1 million a month in New York. So it behooved us to coordinate with them as well as Great Wolf. We have great relationships with them. Camelback's a little more closer to the vest, and they don't spend as much on television. They're more of a hotel company, and usually hotel companies don't really spend that much on TV.
Hmm.
They're not attraction-based companies. So they just see it differently.
Interesting. Thank you.
Sure, happy to.
Hi, Chris. This is Lisa. How are you?
Hi,
I'm,
how are you?
I'm great. I'm curious if you see any additional transportation lines coming into the Poconos. We keep hearing about the train. We know there's the Marts bus from New York, but there doesn't seem to be transportation from the DC area, like a bus, or from Philadelphia. What do you see as prospects of that to help increase visitors?
Well, I'm gonna whisper when I say this, but the train is. I'm just gonna go. I, I'm hopeful. I mean, maybe this is Pollyanna, but I mean, I'm just hopeful that we're in the second phase with the Amtrak with rail now. Um, and the FRA did fund the second portion. So the third one is okay. The second portion is all the engineering's done. The third portion is now we're going to build it. That decision could be made within a year. Now, with this administration, who knows? If I could say pretty confidently, if Biden would have got reelected, it wouldn't have been a problem. If Matt Cartwright would have got reelected, it wouldn't be a problem. But it is a problem now. So we're continuing to advocate for that and continuing to push forward because we think it's a great project, not only for us, but for Scranton and everybody else. To the other questions, like with March and everything, we have not heard anything with that, with transportation from Philly, but we were hopeful that, Amtrak would do something from Philly to, it's a little convoluted, but from Philly to New York and New York to the Poconos. So Amtrak really wants it because there's a similar line in New England. It's very similar and it does really well. It's in like a resort type community and it's another passenger line from Boston. It does like really well. So Amtrak wants this because they think it's very viable. The other projects are like they're so far out there, except for one, um, a high-speed rail line from Houston to Austin. So that one is in the same phase as ours is. There's only two in the country, ours and the one in Houston. But I hate to say it, but Texas is in our state. So I'm sure they'll probably get it. In fact, we're fairly certain they will for other reasons. But we continue to kind of really advocate for that. Um, we think that would be like a very important first step to add more transportation. If uh, maybe we would be able to talk to Marts about doing something on the weekends. It's a little more different if they saw Amtrak being successful, for instance. So that we were hoping it would do other things. So we'll see. I mean, we still try to be hopeful.
Hey, Chris, a question for you on the park. I hear it's not a national park, but it is a national park. Can you explain that and then what we might do to make it a park?
So it's interesting, oh my gosh, it's interesting you asked that question, Mark, because I've asked that same question. I don't get any answers. So the first thing somebody will say right away is, well, this doesn't mean we're going to get any more money. It's like, okay, why do it? Which is, they're not going to get any more staffing. They're not going to get any more money. Um, but there is something with land distribution. So there are some private camps that are close to the park, um, that they're trying to make the argument that if they transfer it into a national park, it would infringe hunting rights in that land, but it really doesn't. So um, it doesn't really change the status very much, from what I understand. In other words, if we were made a federal park tomorrow, we're not going to get any more money. We're not getting more staffing. From what I understand, it's very political. There are regional park executives that decide where the money goes. So during COVID and even after that, our park was one of the top 10. In fact, we were more visited than Yellowstone, which just kind of like blew me away when I saw that. But it's true. Um, so I'm not sure that designation does a lot for us. And again, I asked the person who was superintendent, and that's the first thing she said. She said, Chris, it's not going to get us any more money. That it's more of a land issue with adjacent landowners, from what I can tell.
And as far as development goes, it's nothing significant new up there.
Not, yeah, because right away she said, well, we're not getting any more money. So there could be no more development for more campsites or any of those. I mean, they'd have to go through the process of just like what every other national park would have to do. If they want to build something on the site, it has to go through a huge amount of hoops. And then there is not a local, but there is a regional representative that decides who gets the capital. Because I've talked to like all three of them. And the gentleman who just retired, who's the nicest guy in the world, John, he was there for about 20 years. So he explained that whole process to me. And like, I don't really think we're going to get anything more. Now, if they came to us, we would support it, but we have to be careful because the train has to come first. Like as far as advocacy goes, that could be like a real game changer for us in a big way.
Chris, you have two questions in the chat. So the first one is from Mason and it's related. So that's why I'm cutting you right there. It says,
Yeah, sure.
why would NPS layoffs increase visitation at national parks?
It's a good question. The theory is that because it's shining a light on it again, just like kind of COVID shined a light on there, and that was the only thing that you could do, basically, was visit a park and be outside and social distance. So the theory is that people think these parks may close at some point. So it's going to really push um, visitation, number one. And then number two, honestly, it's economics. Um, when we see slowdowns, we sell assets that are free. So we try to sell the state parks, which there are a lot in our market, a lot. We try to sell the lakes, the rivers, and the federal park. So it's two different reasons.
And then Juana asks, she goes, I've seen Pocono Springs come up on social media recently. Do you think STRs will be affected if they build that?
So Pocono Springs is not happening. Um, we worked with a developer for years, and the second that COVID happened, we did see a slowdown of him, and of course, everybody, the whole world was stopped at that time, and then it became less and less and less and less, and then we were told that the project was not happening. Actually, the land's been sold, so that same developer does not own it. So yeah, that's definitely not happening.
I'll throw another one at you. So, one of the things that we push back on regulation is that, you have to get a license for an Airbnb or short-term rental property, and that comes because you charge for rent. But yet visitors can come into a community, come into someone's home, and they go completely unrestricted. And, we sometimes mockingly maybe shoot ourselves in the foot if we tease a township and say, well, why don't they matter if they're not paying? Why does it only matter if they pay? But how do we have stats on like how many people come to the Poconos, stay overnight, and don't pay?
That's a really good question, and maybe I can answer it this way. We've always seen friends and family. Despite all the marketing that we do, having said everything I just said, friends and family is a huge referral for people visiting our marketplace. So it's significant, but we don't really have any data on it. Maybe that's something we could do in the future, but we know that that's fairly significant. And the study that the state has just done, and I'm sure you guys know about, that has just been issued. Be interesting to see what happens with that. Very interesting to see how they use it. To me, it really codified a lot of things that were out there, so now it's going to be interesting to see what they do with it.
Right, because you could come up with different forms of membership as your property. There's a company, Picasso, who has a fractional share, right? You buy an eighth of a vacation house, and you're not necessarily paying to stay there. So one would assume you don't have to pay to get an STR license.
Yeah, and when the state issued that study, after the commission study, it usually when they do something like that, somebody has legislation around somewhere that relates to it. Now, we do have a lobbying firm that we work with, and we work very closely with PRLA too. They're not aware of anything, but if they were, they would tell us like pretty quickly so we could do something. But as far as I know, there isn't anything right now. But that doesn't mean there isn't something cooking or brewing. But I talk to our lobbyists like weekly, or at least bi-weekly, and that's one of the things I always ask: Are you hearing anything? The answer is no. So yeah, they're pretty good at knowing kind of what's out there because when somebody's circulating a sponsor memo, so in other words, anything that relates to tourism or hospitality or short-term rentals, if somebody has legislation, they're circulating it, they send it to us right away because whoever the bill writer is looking for co-sponsors. So we would know about it even before co-sponsors get signed on it. And so far, nothing's out there.
Okay. That's good, we think.
We hope. They said, although we did get to talk to the people that did the study, the she's pretty bright, and her concern was it was all from in her district. Unfortunately, there was short-term rental that there was a homicide in the unit, and that was somebody who she knew fairly well.
Ah.
And
This is the woman in Pittsburgh.
right, and that's what kind of and she's bright though, so she was really gracious with her time. So I was able to talk to her for about 20 minutes. She really listened to what we said, um, and actually and our lobbyists gave them more information. So I think that some of that definitely did help. And she was doing it for the right reasons. You could really tell. I mean, she was pretty affected by it, when I talked to her. So
Yeah, we're worried, of course, more regulation. And when they started to talk about a scale of this, if you had more than 10, you might fall under, was it Title 48 or something, the Hotel Act? And
right.
then it would seem like they start talking about sprinkler systems or something like that. So it seemed to be an odd kind of requirement that if you owned a lot of these, you had to do something different than if you only owned one or five.
And the one thing, and Mark and Marty, we've talked about this a lot, but just this group, I'll say that the one thing, and I'm sure you've talked about this to your group, but is to be aware of what the school districts to a lesser degree, but the townships are doing. Like always be aware of that. But secondly, if you live in a township, consider running, for a township position. I mean, a lot of times there are people that have been in these positions forever just because nobody's run against them. Um, and now there's no local press that's looking over their shoulders for any reason. And they could pretty much do almost anything they want. Even if they say to you, well, yeah, we complied by all the laws, we posted, and maybe they, I'm sure they probably did, but there's nobody covering anything right now. So, the one thing I'm even like, I talk to this to my team all the time. So, A, you got to vote. B, you got to watch what's going on in your own townships and counties. And C, if you live here, consider like volunteering for something on a committee in a township or running for a township supervisor's position. Like for instance, um, Monroe County just increased their taxes 37%. They're going to do another reassessment. And East Stroudsburg, for instance, the borough had increased their taxes 27%. And the school district's going to go up too. So it's just not only like for you guys, but just our residents. It's tough right now, because we don't have an industrial base. So
Yep. Tourism's it.
yeah, I mean it really is. And I love tourism, don't get me wrong, but we have to start diversifying our economy, and we have to really pay attention to what's happening in the school districts, townships, and in the county. Because sure, federal government, state government, sure. I mean, they're going to affect your everyday life, but it's most affected by, as you guys all know, you folks all know, by your local school districts and townships and counties
And HOAs.
and HOAs. So and that's a good point. It's like, how does our local delegation feel about that? If a bill came up, how would they react? And they know because we talk to them, and we're really, I got to say this right off the bat, we're really lucky. We have a really strong local delegation in the state that understands, pardon me, how important tourism is. Our county commissioners absolutely understand how important it is, and they're good. They're really really good, um, and they're very very supportive. There's some counties in the state that they're they just are very adversarial, when it comes to tourism. Our folks are not. So we're very, very lucky there. Um, but in the next election, there's going to be a lot of seats in the courthouses are going to be open, and there's a lot of county commissioners that aren't running again. So you could see a lot of turnover in the next election. And that does affect us, even though they don't have anything to do with zoning. I'll tell you that right off the bat. They have influence. They absolutely, and a lot of them came from local government, 9 out of 10 times. In Monroe, the last chair was Sharon. Oh my gosh, her nicest lady in the world too. Anyway, she was the superintendent in Stroudsburg School District, so she has a school district background. So, and a lot of them they came from local school districts or townships.
To support our local cleaners running for our supervisor, right?
It can't, it can hurt if you have somebody, when I tell this story all the time. Brian's probably he's probably gonna roll his eyes when I tell it. But when I worked for Hershey, I was on the school board, and a colleague of mine was a township supervisor. So I became board president. He chaired the township board. So nothing came before those boards that we didn't know about, when it related to the companies. And, you know, that it's and it was in the best interest of the town because the company paid a tremendous amount of taxes, tremendous amount. So, um, it's just kind of a thought on that.
I'm sorry, I laughed because Brian questioned you in the chat. He said, Chris, you worked at Hershey.
Oh, Sydney does that one too. I worked at a company in South Central Pennsylvania, Brian.
That's it.
So, Chris, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
How can the VRO and our members, like, how can we align ourselves and get like a synergy with like the tourism people around here, the resorts and things like that? Like, what can we do as a group too to support our members in that?
So, I think Mark and Marty, you guys have talked to Don Plow. Um, you guys are very forthright and straightforward when people have questions. Because the hoteliers are always like, well, we have laws we have to follow. We have other, you know, but you guys are always very level-headed and transparent in how you handle that. And I think that gains a lot of points because you're both trying to do the same thing. And my argument is, I've said this to our board a lot of times, is that um, without short-term rentals, we would not be able to handle the demand for our market for overnight lodging. And I worked it out one time, so I took the 2.78%, whatever it was, and I worked it back. And not to bore you, but I mean, it, since 2020, we've had over 500 to $600 million more of lodging revenue in our market, and a lot of it's due to Kalahari, but and the other properties, but a lot of it's due to short-term rentals as well. If we wouldn't have had that capacity, we wouldn't have been able to attract that guest. That's an important fact, and when I do make presentations, I say that because I think it's important. And it's a very, very important part of our industry. And that's why we wanted to support you guys in this association because we feel like you're really important partner. Not feel like, but you are important partners. And, um, we want to help you to be able to be successful and to advocate for yourselves. And when we go to the state, and the PRLA has an advocacy day, which we go down and advocate because we're big strong supporters of PRLA, which we should be, and they support short term rentals. We continue to advocate for that there too. But if there's another organization down there, say you guys are there, then all of a sudden politicians are going, oh, there's another organization out there. It seems like there's more energy and synergy around it. It's just not us saying it. Um, that probably would be really helpful too to go to something like that. And we could talk to PRLA about it to see if you guys wanted to go down and talk to. Now, our reps, like you'd be speaking to the choir because they know how important it is, but just reps from the other parts of the state, when they start hearing, hey, we're organized up here, we have an association, we're representing people, like all of a sudden they start to listen to that. So, um, and we're happy to take you guys with us anywhere we go if that's helpful to you, because it's helpful to us too.
Oh, absolutely. I think, and as you may recall, we applied to become part of PRLA, and then there was some concern that there might be pending legislation based on that joint commission and that study. And I think as that gets unpacked and realized that we should still be in the room and there's not a lot of other organizations like this in the state. And hopefully we can set the bar. I know there's been grumblings here and there of little rental alliances, if you call us that, popping up in other districts, but we'd be happy to also try to bring that same sense of professionalism to some of these other areas.
No, and you guys are really great. I mean, I'm not just saying it, I really mean it. And we're happy to help with that, like any way that we can, because I agree with you. I think showing that strength is going to be incredibly helpful as we move forward. And you guys should be at the table. And I want to advocate for that with PRLA too, because I just think that's really important. You guys are an important part of the industry in Pennsylvania, and I think you absolutely need to be at the table. Just my own opinion.
Right. And my quick comment is it's not short-term rentals versus brick and mortar. It's cooperating together because as each of us grow, tourism grows, which helps both sides. So it's really cooperative, not competitive.
I can't say that any better. I mean, I think you're totally right, Marty. Um, because honestly, like I think this is like a good case study for it in a way, is that we could not have had the demand that we have right now and host as many guests as we do without short-term rentals. To me, like that's pretty clear.
Well, I think we
It,
also we've seen with some of our members, they are beneficiaries, let's say, of a Pocono brand. But in many cases, they've created their own little luxury getaways, their own little mountain retreats. They go into the metro markets, they market their property, and often you hear about the story of them, come to this great, fantastic place, have your landmark birthday, have your landmark event, and it's in a mountain market. And oh, by the way, it's in the Poconos. And so in some of those cases, they're bringing guests that might have been looking in Catskills or Berkshires or Vermont, even the Hamptons in some sense, if the property can be that competitive, and bring them here. So I think that's sort of not discounting the brand of Poconos, but at times it's a supporting brand, not the lead brand.
well, and I would argue that you're building our brand. Your product is just as much a part of our brand as Kalahari is, or Camelback or Great Wolf. And when you see Camelback in the Pocono Mountains, you guys, it's the same thing. You guys are helping to build and modify our brand. When you have those really unique experiences that you build for a guest, that just like enhances our brand tremendously and geometrically. Because I think the folks coming from like New York and Philly, let's just take those two markets, they want those upscale experiences and they're willing to pay for them. And, that really enhances the reputation of our destination. Oh my gosh, you guys probably have all on the call have heard this before. Oh, isn't that where they have heart-shaped tubs and champagne? Now, thank God we hear it less and less now than what we used to. But, that was what millions of dollars in advertising and all the properties did for what, 15 years or 20 years, maybe even longer than that. So now we're building something new. And I always say this to everyone, the Poconos owners, and I see you guys as all being individual owners, just like a person who owns Kalahari. You guys are very visionary in remaking the brand all the time. And that's why we're surviving. Oh, there were definite times when it looked kind of dicey. Um, but, now as we continue to grow and evolve the product, it's evolving with the guest wants and needs, and that's perfect. So now we're in some what third phase of the water park's revitalization. Think about like how many properties there were like Skytop, right? And now Skytop's the last one, so and I hope it never goes away.
And here's a problem we have that the hotels don't have is if the hotels get a bad guest, they booked a room for four and 20 people show up, right? And the hotel throws them out or figures out how to deal with it. That doesn't hit the newspapers like, oh, look, Kalahari's a rotten place because they have a bad guest who turned the room into a party room. If we get one house that gets turned into a party house, then
Yeah.
everybody points to the party house and paints that brush against the rest of us. Even though VRO promotes the good neighbor policy, respect to the community, and the neighbors don't see us, the good neighbors, because we just enjoy the Poconos just like they do. But that one party house paints that bad brush against all of us. So I really, and
Yeah.
Mark keeps hearing me say this over and over. We need to find a way to shut the party houses down so fast that, if I'm catching you Saturday night with 30 people, I want to evict you Saturday night.
Yeah. I know that's a tough. Maybe this is just my imagination, and tell me if it is. But it seems like we hear those stories less and less. Then when I first started here, it seemed like I heard them all the time.
Mhm.
Oh, there's this place down there's and oh, they had this. Oh, the septic's overflow. Like I used to hear that all the time, and honestly, I haven't heard that in a long time. So I
I
think
could,
something's happening good.
yeah, the
I
township
think.
meetings, you get the one. Look, I went to Cuba, and there is somebody that owns two to three houses who literally advertise them as party houses. And so they're just a nuisance, right? And so it's a slow process to shut them down. And my attitude is I want to compress that process. And if you talk to the police chief over at the Pocono Regionals, he goes, they really get, in terms of the number of properties, very few short-term rental complaints that he has to respond to.
Well, and I
Very.
agree. I agree. A lot of the cops I've talked to is who was telling me, "Oh, we need part of the hotel." First of all, the townships cannot get the hotel tax. I mean, the reason why it was structured the way it was in 2017 was so that it could completely go into marketing because it was to be diverted a lot. But they would say, "Oh, they need to pay the tax because we're getting dispatched all these private," and they say, "No, we don't." Like they all tell me that.
No, they
Like
don't.
every time I talk to them, it's like, yeah, no, we don't. That's not a thing for us. You know. So that's
It's
another
not a
big
never.
misconception. Yeah,
It's an occasional. It's a
yeah. I
rare.
mean, right.
Right.
It's not like every day of the week, like 5 times a night. And that's I think there are a lot of misconceptions. Unfortunately, like you said, you get painted with that brush. Which isn't fair.
Right.
Hey
And
Chris, it's
certainly,
Cindy. Hear
Cindy,
me? Hey, how are you?
good. How are you?
Good. So my problem is these pricing analysis, like Airbnb does, Price Labs, whatever. They're the ones I feel are driving the prices per night down. And that's what's getting a lot of the party houses here, because if you can get a house, for like 150 a night, of course you're going to go for that over a 300, 350, or even $600 a night hotel room. And that's where I think ever since the, Airbnb, VRBO, any of the platforms came about, that's where the pricing, I think, fell. And
That's
I wish
pretty.
we could try and figure something out about that.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to see when you're doing, years ago, years ago, people before the web, right? You had to call around to find out what rates were and then set your rates. Now it's so easy to see it online, and then
I
the
know.
tools are out there, right? So it I mean, and I guess it gets kind of scary when you're on that end of it and you're staring at something that's not booked, right? So
Mhm.
you're like, hey, I'll accept X versus Y just to get it booked. One thing, and this is the other reason why we're subscribing to all the data that we could show booking patterns now that we want to share with everybody that shows where even waiting a little bit longer gets you a higher rate as you get closer to a date. Now, it's a little bit more hair pulling, but the data absolutely shows us that. And the guest is much more last minute now than what they ever were because they have the availability of technology to book, right? Um, so maybe there's a way for us to, and again, we just, it took us probably about 6 months to 8 months to get to where we are now with Amazon Web Services. So at our tourism day meeting on May 26th, if any of you guys can make it to that, we'll get you on the list if you're not on already. We don't care if you're members or not. We just like you to come. Um, the We're going to be talking a lot about how we're going to use our data. We're going to have somebody from Amazon Web Services there to kind of talk a little bit about trending, and we want to be able to give this data for all of you guys to use it in situations where price is a real concern. And the other thing too is when we know we have peak times, we want to pull back advertising and we want to advertise in times that we really need it. And this data gives us the ability again to get to the rifle approach versus the shotgun approach with marketing much more effectively. Um, so that's why we're spending a lot of time and energy on it. And Cindy, you might be able to help with that too.
they,
Yeah, I think that's my biggest frustration. Everybody can tell me, oh, supply and demand, but it's those pricing labs because I'll even get owners myself who I property manage and they'll be like, no, I want my property booked. I want to drop the price. And I'm like, if
Yeah,
you do this, wait and see. And they did it and their house got damaged. And I'm like, will you listen to me now? Now we keep the prices up. They get more money in their pocket and less damage in the property. So
we're
that's what they
yeah,
don't understand.
yeah, we're saying the same thing. Yeah, and I understand it's probably hard to manage their anxiety, right? Oh, well, hurry up, you got to book it, But um, sometimes I hate to say people have to learn a lesson the hard way. So that's why we're trying to get the data out there in a way that people can. And thanks, Brian, for putting the right date in there. I said the wrong date. Um, that's we're trying to put it because people say data. Like when I see that, I start geeking out. When other people hear data, they're like, So we want to put it in a format that people could really consume it and it's easy and understand those patterns. So then if you're in a situation with a homeowner like that you're working for, you could say, look, this is what the data says and show it to them. Now, maybe they're still going to be anxious. I don't know, but hopefully it'll help.
Yeah, agreed.
Hey, Chris,
Yeah.
I don't know, your comment about as you get closer, the price goes up. And all the data analysis I do, and I do it for the property, so I'm figuring out, competitive pricing. We're finding the further away you are from booking it, the more you're willing to pay. So if it's January and I want this week in July, I'm picking that property at that price. When I get closer to the booking window, maybe it's April for that July week, I'm going to pay a little bit less. And if it's the week before, you know, literally the prices drop, right?
Yeah.
Across the market. So as you get closer to that week, the prices are actually dropping, not going up,
Yeah.
is what
See,
I'm finding.
some of the stuff that we're seeing is a little bit different. So
Wow, I'd like to see that.
I don't want to really opine on that until I see all the final data. Because what we're doing is we have a couple of different properties who have volunteered to give us data. Um, and some of them are attractions, some of them are just, they're kind of pretty close to like short-term rentals properties, you could say. So we want to get data from all types of different places, but the snippet I saw showed that um, I should say this too. This was pretty clear. There were certain windows of time that we probably don't have to spend any money at all. Um, because like say and I even knew this like in a company I used to work for, but like the week before July 4th was traditionally a week that people booked like crazy.
Right.
And so that's what a week probably we don't have to spend a lot of money on. Now, could we take those dollars to spend them on a different week? Probably. So those are the kind of things that we saw right away. But we also did see that there were some points that the closer you got to the date, the more you paid because of the supply and demand aspect, we thought. But we need to look at that a little bit more.
Interesting, because I'm sure the week before July 4th in Hershey Park was booked months before that week.
Mm,
Not
you'd be
not as much last minute,
well. See, here's the whole thing, though.
because I want that
There's
week.
there's so many rooms that yes and no. There's so many rooms in that market now, and in theory, the park's capacity was unlimited in theory.
Right.
So you'd be surprised. I mean, there's like 30,000 rooms in that market, which is crazy. But like between Lancaster, Dauphin County, Cumberland County, York, there are a lot of rooms in that market. There are almost as many as there are in Philadelphia. I mean, it's huge.
Now, if I
So
look at Kalahari Water Park tickets, and I happen to be there with a dozen people from my family and friends converging on a Pocono Saturday. I booked my Kalahari ticket a couple of weeks ago for $100, 99. My daughter booked hers 2 weeks ago for 129, and same day is 169. So the price got higher as you got closer to that day for water park tickets. I don't
we'll
know what they
see.
did for the hotel.
We'll see that they were higher. Because their capacity is limited. So, they have a throughput that they have pretty much down to a science, but so do the other two. And the outdoor water parks, same thing. Um, they pretty much have it. Well, maybe not the outdoor water park, but the indoor water parks they definitely have down to a science. And
Hmm.
there's a theoretical capacity where it's very coming from an attractions background. There's a capacity where it's absolutely uncomfortable,
Right.
right? So no question about it. It's not a good thing for the guest. It's not a good thing for the property. So, but in that case, you notice as you got closer, the price went up.
Yes. So it agrees with your model.
Yeah.
As the weeks got closer until the last day, the price curve kept on going up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess like they definitely have limited capacity here too, like your ski resort, same thing. Um, and I know like now they all have passes, like the season passes, there's all types of different different models with that too as well.
I went to Killington and now they sell fast passes to get in front of the lift line on President's Weekend for $50 a day. And I spent it because I didn't want
And
to
that
spend a few hours online. I wanted to spend a few hours skiing.
so it's for you, it was worth it.
It was worth it.
Yeah.
Chris, I have one more marketing question. So, from the marketing person, what can our members do? I mean, like we definitely, guys, I hope everybody follows the Poconos, the Visitors Bureau, the website, and I mean, the events coming out. I mean, just on social media, I can't log on without seeing something. So, what can we do as like, the members? What can they do as far as promoting this on their sites or getting ready for big events? And how can we work to like, get people here?
If I could say two things, if you can, we put a tremendous amount of time and energy and resources into PTN. And thanks for wearing that hat, Maria. It just makes my heart sing.
I had to.
Makes my heart sing. But we do, and it's a 365, 24/7. Um, if you can send the guest a link, one of the things that we found out is from our metrics is that the guest will view it for 3.5 hours. So, and that gives them all types of ideas to come back again. Um, so, and we do a lot of we should probably do more, but we do short-term rental programming on PTN. In fact, one of our commercial spots, we have something in there about short-term rentals. Um, so if you can introduce the guest to that, we could send you a link from our website. Um, and there is a player on our website. You could consume it there. You can get it on Roku, like on any of the streaming services. Again, we're over the air, we're on cable systems, but we can send you a link that you could send to the guest. I would say that it would be good for you guys too because it sells the region, I think, very effectively because of our storytellers, um, and it gives the guest a reason to return. So, yep, Brian just put the link in the chat. So please take a look at that. And if you can use it, one thing I would love to do is kind of like I'm always about trying to push PTN out is trying to get our partners, like short-term rental partners, to use PTN on their screens and their units. When a guest comes in, to be able to turn that on and talk about everything Poconos, you
It's
know?
just like the hotels when I went to Kalahari, that screen stayed on the whole time I was there.
Yeah, and we just actually got it. There's a couple of technical issue down, but we just got it turned on in Kalahari. Ours, and Kalahari has their own too. So it's for the guest. It's like and it's thank you for that question. It's a really, we think, good tool to be able to sell the region, and again, hopefully have them revisit you guys again. Because as you guys know, you're providing good hospitality too. um, you get a guest to stay and get into a pattern, they'll keep coming back, hopefully, year after year after year. So, and as we all know, it's hard to generate a new guest versus having a repeat guest.
Great. Brian put a great thing in the comment. I don't know if everybody's looking at the comments. It says one thing like what Chris is speaking to. This year, we're seeing a big demand for the week prior to June 21st, 22nd, and the week after that due to the race for pre-bookings than those dates over the last 4 years. This is both for STR and hotels. This is a trend we will look at moving forward. The last 4 years, the race was in mid-July, so we are looking at data like this. We still have more to learn, but this is a snippet of the data we're looking at.
That's good.
So even dates like that, things like that, that's important when you're planning for your guests and things like that. Because I mean, when we travel, that's the first thing I do. I look to see what's going on. So if you can provide that ahead of time, you've already caught me. You've taken work off my plate.
And that's great because even like sending that link to a guest in a confirmation email,
Mhm.
to say to find out more about we do that too. And also to our travel guide. Our travel guide is all digitized on our website. So you could send a PDF copy of that. Please use our tools because we develop them so that everybody can use them. And we hope that it would make my heart sing if you guys used all those. That's why we're doing it.
Yeah, but that's great. Something as easy as just putting it in the confirmation email.
Yeah, and it just blows me away because Roku's analytics are pretty good, and Brian knows is digs in more this, and we use Vimeo too to develop a lot of our players and apps. And for instance, if you buy Vizio TV or an LG TV, you'll be able to. It comes loaded with the PTN app, but the PTN on Roku, people watched it the first time 3.5 hours. Like if I run a commercial in in Philly or New York, I don't know if somebody's watching anything for 3 hours after, that relates to us. So the analytics we're getting from our apps to our streaming apps is pretty eye-opening.
Well, I don't know if does anybody else have any questions. Chris, we can't thank you enough. This was so insightful, and all of this is being recorded. It'll be up in the member section, and definitely I'm going to make a little section with all these links to the events calendar and things like that so our members can have access to it.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate being invited. And we do see you all as very important partners of ours. If there's anything that we can ever do to help you, please feel free to just call on us at any time. We're happy to help. And the more insights you give us, the better we could serve you. So thank you so much for asking me to come here.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for
Right.
joining. I just want to show you one more thing. So our next event is our next kind of sponsor webinar is going to be on May 15th. And we have John Bianchi from STR Search. He's going to be talking about 5 steps to finding profitable properties in the Poconos. So the QR code is there. You guys can start registering now. You'll definitely get an email from me. And thank you, everybody.
Well
Thank
done.
you,
Thank you,
guys.
Aisha. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, guys. Have a good
Thanks.
night.
Have a good night, everybody.
See you guys.